to this new session, this new live stream where you can ask me any question you would like to know. I am happily going to answer them. I have a few prepared here that people have asked me over the past month. So let's get right into them. The first one is, how do we adjust to loose cash games with standard raise sizes of 6x or 7x? That's a very good question, and I'm actually just about to release a really big video, a masterclass for live loose splashy cash games, and that one will be this question will be answered in detail in that one. But for now, what I can say is basically you have to play tighter against these ranges, or these raises, sorry. So what you shouldn't do is just keep your standard calling range or 3-betting range and then call them, because you have to be price sensitive here. You can't just call pocket deuces or 4s or 5s or something like that and then hope to hit a set if you're out of position. So that's why it's important to tighten up your ranges, and in any position outside of the big blind I tend to play 3-bet or fold. I play that style anyway, but especially when raise sizes get bigger. So don't fall into the trap of just calling with you whatever you would normally call with, but instead just play much tighter. And if you enter a pot, then just raise. Someone's asking here, hello, is this really live? Yes, it is really live, and it's not even on a 5-minute delay as someone suggested. So feel free to ask your questions. I am very happy to answer them. So yeah, just fire them away. It is indeed live. Next question that I have here: in tournaments, you can't just play tight and wait for big hands. How can we adjust? Well, that is true. In tournaments, it's a bit different than in cash games. You have to play slightly looser, but that's mainly because there are antes in play and you don't have to pay any rake. That is the main reason for that. But yeah, it is true, you can't just wait for aces and kings all tournament. But it doesn't mean that you should get in there and battle with your king 7 offsuits and your 9-8 offsuits and things like that. You still have to be price sensitive, just what we said earlier. Even in tournaments and low stakes tournaments, a lot of players will raise to something like 6 or 7x. Again, just don't call there with any hands that you would normally do if there was a min raise or something like that. And yes, it can sometimes happen that you sit there for 2 or 3 hours, especially in turbo structures, and you just don't see a hand, and then one time you get involved, you just bust. That will happen. That has happened to me as well. But that doesn't mean that you should change your entire strategy and do something very different, or do something what everyone else at the table is doing. In live tournaments, a lot of players will just limp, or they will play very wide, they will call very wide. Not a good strategy. But yes, it's true, at some point you will have to push it then when you have some sort of a hand. The next one: how can I improve my exploitative play? So that is a very, very good question. I really love that one. I almost made that one up myself, but no, it came from someone. Well, the question is very good. The answer is not very easy, though. So there are, of course, things that you can learn, and I have a few videos on my channel as well about exploitative play. You can search for them. There are very good other creators that have content on that. So you can learn certain things, and you can do very well with them. But if you get to a certain point, then maybe those will, like, I mean, they will always work, let's put it like this, but against low stakes players. But there will be better players where it will be harder to exploit them. And even against low stakes players, it's not always that easy to implement these strategies. So at the end of the day, you just have to become more experienced and a better poker player. So what I would suggest to do is, yes, do watch a lot of content or read books or whatever about these things, about exploits. And once you feel comfortable with them, just try to use them more and more in your games, and then with time you will pick up more things. And the other thing that's really, really important is to pay attention. I see so many players just sitting on their phones and typing away, reading, whatever. Just don't do that when you're at the poker table. Try to pay attention, because the main thing when exploiting someone is to actually figure out what they're doing wrong. So you can't exploit them if you don't know what they're doing wrong, and you can only know what they're doing wrong if you pay attention. Sometimes, yes, the mistakes will be so massive that, that everyone can notice them without even paying attention. But most of the time, you will need to pay some attention. So I would say that's the most important factor to consider. Just pay attention to what everyone is doing wrong, and then automatically you will know what to do against that. Maybe not in every situation, but then you can ask someone in the forum, or indeed in these live streams. Ask me how to exploit someone who does a certain thing, and I'll be very happy to go through those. So we have a few more questions here. Empire or Hippo asked me someone, so I don't exactly know what that means, whether which one I prefer or where I play more. So I really like both of them. It really depends. So these are both casinos in London, and they are the two casinos I play most in. Also the Victoria, the Vic as well. I like the Empire cash race, so whenever I can set aside 100 to 120 hours a month, I will play there. Otherwise, more at the Hippo if I can't put in that volume. But both are excellent casinos and very well run casinos indeed. How to convince people to play mix games? PLO is not a mix. Well, the thing with that one is a lot of players just don't want to even play PLO, and that's very difficult to convince them to play a mix. That said, I know sometimes if most people want to play it, there will be even some pros who have never played PLO will say, okay, yeah, let's do a mix game, a round of each or something like that. But it's very hard, because the problem is, if you want to convince a good player, you would have to do it in a rational way to tell them, okay, if you play this game, you will win more money. But against unstudied players, you have to maybe try to get them more by their emotions, especially if they lost. Maybe you can say, hey, this is a good chance to get your money back or something like that. But in general, I think it's very hard. If someone doesn't want to play a mixed game, then I think it is very hard to convince them to do that. Next one, should I be playing tighter than GTO to exploit the bad splashy regs in live play to make the most money? So again, I'm just recording, or I recorded the masterclass on exactly this topic earlier today. Whether you should play tighter than GTO, it depends a bit, but yeah, it really depends. So just in a nutshell, if you are in early position, you have to tighten up, and you don't have to be tighter than GTO, but you have to make some deviations. So for example, I would rather raise a hand like pocket deuces than ace 10 offsuit or ace jack offsuit, because if I think that I will go 5 or 6 ways to the flop anyway, then I don't really want to be in there with ace jack offsuit out of position against 5 players. Whereas with pocket deuces, it's a different story, because if I miss, then well, I'm not going to put any more money into the pot. But if I hit a set there, then I can really make a lot of money against these splashy loose players. So that's why in early position, don't play necessarily tighter, but just make these small deviations towards hands that play better multi-way. And in later position, it just depends really if someone's opened ahead of you or not. If you're first to act on the button or in the cutoff, I would actually play a little wider against bad players, assuming that they're not the type that will 3-bet you. But if I hear loose and splashy, I assume that they will be on the looser and on the more passive side. So there, if you can be in position, you can actually widen your range. But in general, the message is this one. Yes, you have to be pretty tight. Not necessarily tighter than GTO, but you have to be tighter. Definitely not looser than GTO overall, because that will just be mean to burn money, where it's just unnecessary in these easy games. It means it's a more boring style of play because you just can't play as that many hands, and sometimes it will be very annoying if you folded 10-9 offsuit and then the flop comes 10-9-9 and another player is in there with 9-8 or something like that. Happens, but that's not a reason to just try to see a flop with any two cards. So next one says, I love your YouTube channel. Thank you very much. That's very much appreciated. Next one, I've recently started playing PLO as the achievable win rates are far higher. So yeah, I have heard that from a few people, and that's great. I personally don't tend to play, or not don't tend, I don't play PLO, but I can absolutely see the appeal of it, and I think that is probably some sort of a gold mine that's not really been discovered yet. If, and that is a big if the games actually run consistently, because these games just don't have much of an appeal for a lot of good regs who are not the top regs or who are just not interested in that. So me included, for some reason, I just prefer to stick to no limit hold'em. But yeah, if you do like PLO and you study, that's in a way much better, because there are not many channels like this one, for example. So I'm teaching a lot of things about no limit hold'em, but I'm not teaching anything about PLO, and you will not find many channels teaching PLO, which means that there it's still a bit more obscure. If you have good information or good instinct or something like that, you can make more money, I believe. However, you have to be aware that variance just goes through the roof there. And I think if no limit hold'em in live poker, the variance will go through the roof because of straddles and because of the multi-wayness of the games. But in PLO, that's even like a couple of steps bigger, so you just have to be aware of that. What do we have here? Just game select well and bum hump. Nothing improves your win rate more than that. Yeah, that's pretty much, yeah, that's pretty good. Game selection is always important. Bum hunting, that refers to just trying to play against weaker players. That's absolutely true, but that's only true if you're already a good player, because if you're not much better than the players that you're bum hunting, there's not much scope in that one. So yeah, you just have to be aware of that. That's why studying is also very important. But yes, these two factors are definitely very important. Okay, what percentage breakdown of stakes do you play? Do you think you are maximizing hourly, playing lower with higher win rate? If not, what variables do you think you gain not playing bigger to compensate? Okay, I don't know if this refers to live or online, but since this is the live poker guide, I'm just going to answer this about live poker. Well, the breakdown for me, unfortunately, is like very high percentage of 1-2 with a little 1-3 and hardly any 2-5. And the reason for that is that I am a daytime player. I tend to go to the casino at like 9 or 10 in the morning, and I leave at about 6 p.m. And I just do not have the luxury of choosing between these different stakes. There is a 2-5 game from about 1 p.m., 2 p.m. onwards, but at that time of the day, it'll be like 7 regs and one recreational player, or actually more like 5 regs and one recreational player, sometimes even just 6 regs basically. So I'm not really going to get involved there, but that is just my personal one, and I don't think you wanted to know that, but more like in general. So in general, I would say it really depends like on several factors, but the main ones being really how good are the games at the higher stakes. Like if you can have a game at 2-5 that is slightly worse than the game at 1-2 or 1-3, I would always play the 2-5, assuming that you're bankrolled for it, obviously, because if not, then never play it. But if you're bankrolled for it, then I would always play the higher one in these circumstances, simply because the rake will be lower in big blinds, and you will just win more money, both in big blinds and then also in actual money. So I would always prioritize that. But the one thing that can get in your way is the ego. So I noticed that myself when I tried to play 2-5, and I tried to play 2-5 more regularly, and then I was stuck in a really bad game, and it took some convincing to myself of saying, no, I really need to get up here and move down to a 1-2. I don't care what all these other regs think about me now if I just take my chips and move down the stakes, because it just wasn't a good game. So I would say, if that is the case, that the game is not good, then always just leave that one. Always basically try to play the best game possible in the card room. And if that one is the 1-2, then play the 1-2 or 1-3 or whatever it is. And if the higher one is only slightly worse than the lower one, then I would play the higher one. And it's hard to say in percentages, because this is really what's important, nothing else. I don't want to play the higher game just for the sake of it. So I don't want to hit any quotas of like 60-20-20 between three stakes or something like that. If I have the luxury to choose, I will always choose the best game for me in that moment, if that makes sense. And if that is 100% of the time a 1-2, then so be it. I mean, why would I play a game that's not as good for me rather than playing the 1-2? So I hope this kind of makes sense. I'm not sure I got the question completely right, but if not, just ask me again and I'll go through it again. You have a better theoretical game than half the 2-5 London Rex. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. That might be true, might not be true, but yeah, there's no point in playing just against those regs. Even though I'm probably still a winning player there, and I might even make the same money in pounds or dollars as I would at the 1-2 or 1-3. However, with much more variance in a tougher game. So if I don't gain anything, then I won't play that. If I can make, even if it's just £10 or dollars more at the 2-5, I would definitely play that more often. But during the times when I play, unfortunately, that is not really the case. You get less hands per hour at PLO. That is, of course, true. But you can make that up by playing, just by having a bigger edge against recreational players, I guess. Your videos helped me out tremendously. Well, thank you very much, and I'm glad they are helping. So lots more to come. Next one, yes, PLO has far less regs, and the bigger spots tend to gravitate towards PLO because it's naturally a more action game. That is also definitely true. I get to embrace my degenerate side in a plus EV manner. That's amazing if you can do that. So, like, for example, I know that is one of my weaknesses. I really do not like that massive variance. I mean, I'm aware I play poker, so I have to embrace variance. But if I can have a lower variance game, I don't say I always prefer that, because if it is Hold'em, I will choose the table with higher variance that is better for me. But in terms of games, I then just stick to the no limit Hold'em. Game selection is the top pick, absolutely. Do you have 1-2 live pre-flop charts? Live pre-flop charts for 1-2 are actually not that different to any pre-flop charts, except, as I said earlier, I don't know if you saw that, I'll repeat it again. in live poker, I would gravitate towards opening multi-way hands or hands that play well multi-way rather than hands that play better heads up in early position, that is. So if you're under the gun, I would rather open pocket deuces rather than ace jack. But other than that, it's pretty much very similar what you open. You're not going to differ too much. But I am working on creating these sort of charts actually to just make them a bit better for people who struggle with that. But in general, as I say, if you just have the normal GTO ranges, the opening ranges, they will be fine whether you play 1-2 or 1,000 to 1,000. It doesn't really matter. Poker is poker. The only thing is like how your opponents adjust to that. And if you get 5 callers after you made the right open there, well, so be it. You can't control that. And that's their mistake, not yours. But if you then want to maximize your winnings, try to open more hands that play well multi-way from early position. Once you get later, in a later position and everyone folds to you, then you can open wider, and then obviously hands that play better heads up, because then there can't be too many players involved in the hand once you're on the button and everyone's folded to you. Do you think capped games are better for the ecosystem? Ooh, that's a very interesting one. Never thought about that. I think in some ways, yes, but it just depends what the cap is. So I've heard of games where they cap it at 80 big blinds and even 100 big blinds. I don't like it that much. But yeah, probably for the ecosystem, it is better because players just won't lose that much. And I see sometimes when someone buys in with 50 at a 1-2, they lose their stack, then they buy in again and again and again. And it's very different. If they had started with 400 and then lost it, then they might just go home. And so they just stay there for longer. It is probably better for the ecosystem, but also at the same time, it means that it's worse for the good players in the short run. But yeah, it's a very interesting consideration. And yeah, maybe something like 150 big blinds or so cap would be nice. What I don't like is those games where you can buy in for whatever you like, or match the biggest stack, which might be 500 or 800 big blinds. They tend to make for good games there, a lot of action, but it also is not great for the whole ecosystem, I think. How much is your masterclass, or do you have coaching? Someone asked. Well, of the masterclass, I don't have a masterclass at the moment. I am working on one, and I am actually going to release a 1 hour masterclass for free here on my YouTube channel very soon about loose and splashy live low stakes games. And yes, I do offer private coaching. And if you're interested, just send me an email, or just basically just write it in the comment, or hit me up on Instagram, and I'll get back to you with what that one looks like. Okay, makes sense, says WJ. Often the bigger the game, the more likely straddles are in play. That is absolutely true. And it can be difficult for the lower game to be so much better that it makes up for how much smaller it is. Yeah, that's also true. Good answer, and I agree with lots of what you said. Thank you. Great. Do regs not try and avoid the capped games, though? Makes them softer in general? Yeah, I mean, if you have the option, of course, if you have a table that's uncapped and you have a table that's capped, then good regs tend to choose the non-capped one. If you play somewhere in an environment where they only offer capped games, I think in California they have some casinos like that, well, then the good regs don't have a choice there. Point on variance tolerance is very true. I've run terribly lately in games, much bigger than my usual games. Sorry to hear that. How it happens to all of us, unfortunately. I know I'm beating the games comfortably, but my year has been ruined by it. Yeah, but I mean, as long as you're comfortable, you know that, or confident to know that you can beat those games, there is no reason not to continue playing them, assuming that you're bankroll well for them. Okay, when you split stakes, you live and die by how you run at your higher stakes. Yes, that is very, very true. That's exactly it. And that's why even if you play just 1, 2, and then in the straddled pots that are basically 2.5 times as big in terms of big blinds than the 1, 2 pots, then it really only depends on, or not only, but it mainly depends on how you run in those straddle pots. And that's exactly the same as if you play bigger and smaller stakes. And that's exactly it. So, like, that's why shot taking can be quite risky if you only play them sometimes. That's why I like to really try to play a lot at a stake before I can even say something about my win rate or so. Because I often get asked, "What's your win rate at 50 NL or something like that?" Well, I only got like 20 or 30,000 hours on that. Like it's basically irrelevant, and that's why it's a very good point that if you split stakes, it's mainly about how you run at the higher stakes. Do you ever experience a losing month? If yes, how many months are your longest downswings? Okay, I definitely experience losing months, unfortunately. I don't think there is any poker player who takes the game seriously who doesn't have that. I have had, how many months have I had? I like it also depends whether you mean full time play or not. Because, for example, in June, I played about 20 hours of live poker and I was down, I think, about 100 or something like that in 20 hours. So, yeah, technically there was a losing month, but yeah, not really. I think the worst I've ever had, but that was long time ago, and I was a much worse player than I am now. I think I had about 3 losing months where I played, in every month where I played close to 100 hours, something like that. But I've never had more than that. And these days, I mean, touch wood, I've not experienced that bad of a run. I had 3 months in a row that were negative at the beginning of this year, but again, I played a lot in January, didn't play much in February, didn't play much in March, and so it was mainly that big loss in January. That was one of my worst months ever. And in February and March were just small minuses. And then in April, I put in the volume again and I won comfortably. So that was fine. And that's the thing. Like if you have good fundamentals and you play these live low stakes games, even though variance as such is very high, because as I said, straddles and other things, but because if you have such an edge and the players are so bad, and if you play tight, you will actually not have such terrible variance. It's very different if you move up to 2-5 or 5-10 or something like that, or even higher, where you play against many much better regs, and where you have to bluff catch for like 200 big blinds in a pot or something like that. That's a very different territory there. But at 1-2, 1-3, and in some countries even 2-5, although not in London, but in the US, for example, in some places 2-5, there you can actually kind of like regularly print money. And yes, you will have the odd losing month, but not a lot of them. What are your thoughts on WPT online tournaments? Is the monthly fee worth it? Well, to be honest with you, I do not know anything about them. I just, sorry, I can't answer this. I don't know what the monthly fee is there or anything. I'm happy to look into it maybe for next time, but at the moment, I'm really sorry. I just don't know anything about that. What are your top three poker books for live poker 1225 in London? Okay, so that's actually ties in well with another question that I got last time, that I promised that I would answer now. So that was actually more about tournaments, but I'll just answer them both in one go now. So with the live ones, I still think, and even though some people might say that book is outdated because it's now about 8 years old or something like that, but the best book for live poker, especially for 1-2, maybe not so much for 2-5 in London, but for 1-2 in London and for 2-5 in many other places, that would be The Course by Ed Miller. That one really takes you and breaks down how you should play at these live low stakes. and it's such a good book, and I still think it's valid. Yes, it was written in a time before GTO, so there are maybe a few things in there that are not like 100% correct anymore, but I would say 95% of it still applies to this day. Now you have to be careful in some 1-2 games, especially in London, where you have lots of regs there. You have to be a bit closer to GTO than what the core suggests. But in general, if you want to beat 1-2 in 2024, you can still do it with Ed Miller's book. That doesn't mean that you will absolutely crush the games, but I still think that one is the best one. Then the second best one is probably also from Ed Miller, Playing the Player. That one, you have to be a bit more careful, because there he, in my opinion, he suggests too much calling rather than playing more aggressively, but still that one helped me a lot of the time of reading, so I still think that one is very good. And the third one, well, in a very selfish way, I can say my book, and that is the London Poker Guide. That one tells you everything about all the card rooms in London and break considerations, and I have interviews with all the managers of every card room, and with a mental health coach and another coach, and all sorts of things. So that one, specifically for London, I would definitely recommend that one for someone who plays poker in London. You can get it on Amazon or buy it from me in person in a casino if you see me there. And now let's get to the tournament books. So those are a bit trickier, because I don't study that much tournament, but what I know is that Modern Poker Theory by Michael Acevedo, that's the go-to book for catching up with GTO and theory in general. So if you really want to progress with your poker, with your tournament poker, especially if you play online or higher stakes, then that is the book that I would recommend. I think it's not an easy read. I only skimmed through it once and it looked very interesting, but as I say, not an easy read, but definitely very valuable for tournament players. The other one is Exploitative Play in Live Poker by Alex Fitzgerald. So that one's purely exploitative. That's the opposite of Acevedo's book. But then what I find very interesting, even though for cash games it doesn't apply quite that well, but then what is very interesting in terms of just how you can find exploits. And it's basically mostly about aggression, which we probably hopefully all know that aggression is good, but that one is really very helpful in terms of learning exploits, aggression, and so on for tournaments specifically. Next one. Your content along with Carrot Corner really improved my win rate. Thank you very much. Yes, Carrot Corner with Pete Clark. That's an amazing training site as well. More for online poker, but therefore very theory orientated. Also, I can definitely recommend that one. Should you call top pair top kicker on the river after opponent shoves 200, putting you all in? Seemed like a bluff to me after board representation could have been a small straight. Well, I don't really know what hand you're talking about now. It's very difficult to just say, yeah, call or fold top pair top kicker in that spot. I don't even know what stakes we're talking about. Is that 200 big blind that he shoves, or what's that in relation to the pot? What pot odds do you get? And also what was the action before? So unfortunately, I can't answer this, but what you can do is, if you send me the whole development of the hand, leave it in the comments, and I will soon have video where I will review players' hands. So I'm very happy to go through that, but I would need the full hand history for that. Check out Mark Goon, Hungry Horse. He's very good, says someone. Yes, that's also true. Forgot to mention him, but yeah, Mark Goon, Hungry Horse is definitely, although he's a competitor of mine, but I do think that his content is very, very good. I really enjoy that. Also a fun way of presenting it. Yes. Street Soul Lover on YouTube. Oh yeah, I think yes. Mark Goon is on YouTube. Hungry Horse Poker is that. Right, so this is that. Let's get back to some questions that I have here, but in the meantime, fire away with questions live, and I will just continue with this one here. So, how big is poker in London or England, and what about Monte Carlo and other European scenes? So, poker in London is pretty big. I would say it's the biggest one in Europe, apart from maybe Rozvadov, but I think in general, London has a better poker scene even than Rozvadov in the Czech Republic. And in England, pretty good. The rate is pretty good in most casinos in England, outside of London. In Manchester, Liverpool, Nottingham, you got 5% capped at 5 or 6, so that really is very good. Monte Carlo, I don't think they offer poker regularly. I think they only have the big tournaments. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But last time I was there a couple of years ago, they did not have cash games or anything like that. And in general, European scene, not that great. Rake is pretty high on most of the continent. Germany used to be really good, but now there's only really one casino in Wiesbaden that's good. Then you have casinos in like places like Helsinki, Bratislava, in Vienna, Switzerland, but rake tends to be quite high in most of those. Same for like Cyprus, where rake is capped at like 300 euros or something like that, like really absurd. So yeah, not necessarily great. France is also an uncapped rake, absolutely terrible. So London is your best bet for poker in Europe, I would say, if you want to play regularly, if you want to play cash games. If you're after big tournaments, well, then just follow the big tours, and that's where you should play. Um, what's the best and safest poker site for European players? Well, don't have a big opinion on that one. I think PokerStars is getting tougher and tougher for cash games, but I still think that one is one of the safest. But I mean, safe is relative. Safe PokerStars is very safe in the sense that they won't just take your money and leave, but there might be bots on there. There might be collusion, like on any other platform. I don't know which one is the safest or best, unfortunately, for European players. When I call on the river, they always have it. When I fold, they always show a bluff. What am I doing wrong? I mean, I honestly don't think that this is entirely correct. I don't think your opponents are really clairvoyant and always bet when you fold and the other way around. So I think this might, in some ways, be down to variance that you just happen to call a lot when you're beat and you fold when you don't have that much, and then they show you a bluff or so. But in general, I don't think it should be quite like that. What I would say how you can improve is by learning how to bluff catch. So I have a video on that. Just look for that one. It's called My Top Tips How to Bluff Catch or something like that. You will find it on the site. And there I go through the process of bluff catching. There are 3 steps that you have to go through, and then you just decide whether you're good often enough or not according to that, whether it's over bluffed, whether it's natural to bluff, things like that. Not going through all of that now, but check out that video. That can be very useful. Next one here on the stream, I have an average of 73 euros an hour in London in my last 23 sessions. Is 23 sessions start to be representative? Okay, wow, 73 an hour is massive. Now, that depends what stakes you played. So also you say euros, so that would be what, 60, 65 pounds an hour. But it just really depends. Oh yeah, 1-2 pounds at Empire Casino. Okay, if it's at 1-2, that is unfortunately not representative at all. I genuinely believe that even the best players at 1-2 with proper game selecting and all of that, you cannot get anywhere near that. Like, I get to about 20 an hour playing daytime. I know of players who get up to like 30 if they play at night, but that's kind of pushing it. So 35, maybe some absolute geniuses can make 40 an hour, but I generally don't believe that 60 or 70 plus or so is possible at 1-2. Not even if you count the money that you get for the cash raise. So, because that's another £8 per hour, basically, that you have to add. Because if you play about 100 hours a month, you qualify for a tournament that's worth about £700 to £900 a month. So that's why I would say that is unfortunately not representative. And I think, like as we said earlier, if you just happen to have run really good in some big pots that were straddled pots or something like that, or where you just had, like I had, for example, I had a pot aces versus kings, and we were 500 big blinds deep. I just scooped that pot that will just affect my win rate for quite a while if I don't have the negative of that. But funnily enough, just a week later, I had the exact negative. I didn't lose quite as much, but I still lost a very big pot. So that almost neutralized that big win. But if that doesn't happen, that's probably more like what happened there, that you just ran really, really good. However, what I will say is that you're obviously a very good and winning player. I mean, you can't be a losing player and win that much in 23 sessions, assuming that those were long sessions. Now, if you played 23 half an hour sessions, that's different, but I assume that you mean like 6 to 10 hour sessions or something like that. Right. I was sitting on the same cash game table with you and Rosvadov. Oh, hi. And recognized you 1 week later from your videos. Oh, that's really cool. So, hi. Next time you see me, say hi, although I probably won't be in Rosvadov too much. But yeah, remember that I ran really bad in Rosvadov, I must say. I played on the feature table for 2 hours. I played two hands, both times ace king, once on a preflop all in against aces, once a preflop all in against jacks, lost both of them, and that was it. And that, again, there was a 5-5 game. Apart from that, I played 2-4. I ran better in the 2-4 games, but I still went home with a minus because the bigger stake just really kicked in there, and there was not much I could do. Okay, for 80 okay, so back to that one, 81 hours. I didn't read that earlier, 81 hours. So in 81 hours is not a sample size. Like, I would say you can start thinking about it from about 800, 1,000 hours, something like that. 81 is really absolutely nothing that would make me think that that's anywhere near a reasonable sample size. Unfortunately, I wish it were sometimes, especially for you in this case, but no. Right. Next one. I hate playing against maniacs. I feel like I lose a lot of money against them. How can I improve? Well, the one thing that you have to be aware is that if you play against maniacs, you'll just play a much higher variant style of poker. And intrinsically, that means that if you run bad in those situations, then you will lose a lot of money there. Now, I don't know if it's true that, because you say you feel that you lost a lot of money against them, maybe that is because of variance, but it might well be that you did something wrong. So what I would suggest, what you should do there is you just play fairly tight pre-flop as you usually do, and then you just let these players hang themselves. And especially if you have a big hand, you just let them do all the action. Don't raise them as soon as you have, even if you have a good, that's a mistake that a lot of players make. They have a good top pair, for example, but then they have, let's concrete example, they have ace 10 on 10, 8, 5 or something like that. And then they're afraid of draws coming in and so on, or an overcard coming in, and then they check raise the flop or something like that with their ace 10 top pair, top kicker. And then the maniac will fold. And conversely, if they have jack 10 there, then they might call, and then the king comes on the turn or on the river or something like that, and then the maniac will bet big, and then they fold their jack 10 there. And these are the situations where you probably leak money if you're not very careful. So that's what I would say. You just have to bluff catch much wider against them. So if they're true maniacs and they triple barrel with air all the time, then you have to hold on to dear life with your third pair sometimes. That's what it is like. And of course, if he then happens to have top pair in that spot, then you will lose your entire stack in that situation, and that will make you feel like you lose a lot of money against them. But this is the strategy. Let them hang themselves when you have a good hand, And whenever you have a decent hand, just call down, if they're true maniacs, of course, not if they're good, loose, aggressive players, because against them, it's very tricky to play, and that's a completely different beast. Right. Would you say that GTO does not really work in live cash games and the exploitative way of playing is much more effective? If I have to give a short answer, then I would say yes. However, it's not that simple. So pre-flop, I think GTO is absolutely very relevant. So that's why I say you should always memorize the ranges for pre-flop because they are universal. It doesn't matter where you play. Yes, you can tweak them a bit, that's fine, but they are still universal for every no limit hold'em poker cash games that you play. When it comes to post flop, then GTO becomes less and less important. So on the flop, it's still kind of a little bit relevant, and on the turn less, and on the river, it's basically completely irrelevant because on the river, it's all about either when you have the initiative, how much value can you extract, and is your opponent the type of player that would raise you with air, or can you go for thin value, or the other way around, if they bet, are they the type who bluff or who just under bluff, and that will dictate your river play most of the time. On the flop, it's not quite that black and white, although you can get away. So we talked about Hungry Horse Poker. I know he always checks when out of position on the flop, and he range bets when he's in position on the flop. You can do that to simplify the game. I think you can do a little better than that, but in general, that is not bad advice. I always still think about what GTO would do in that spot, but if I'm up against bad players, then I don't even think about GTO. Then I will do whatever I think my hand does best there. So either can I bluff them off their hand if I don't have anything, or can I get value? That's basically the only thing I consider in that spot. But I am up against a lot of other okay-ish regs or even okay recreational players where I have to put in a little bit more thought. And there, I will still not play GTO on the flop, but I will definitely consult GTO, to put it like this. But yeah, in general, you do not need a lot of GTO in live play. That said, it's always great to know the basics, and that's why I'm preparing a class on that as well, where I will teach just the basics of GTO for live players. Remember, there are no good maniacs at 1-2. That is true. Yeah. So if there are maniacs, then they're not good. But there are sometimes good loose aggressive players. But at 1-2, rarely. I agree with that too. But in my game, there are a couple of good ones actually. Your easy hack video to memorize pre-flop GTO is amazing and truly helped me. Well, thank you very much for that, and I'm very happy that I managed to help you. I left the link for that one in the description below, so if someone hasn't watched it, just check it out because that one is really helpful, as you can hear. And when I first heard about that trick, it really helped me a lot as well. I have a question about it though. What range can I call a raise from under the gun when I am cut off? Should I use the same defense range of big blind versus under the gun? No, absolutely not. You should not do that. First of all, if you like, the big difference between being cut off and big blind, there are two differences. In the cut off, you have position on the under the gun player. In the big blind, you don't. But the more important one here is in the big blind, you're already in there for the big blind, so you have to pay less, and even more importantly, there is no one behind you who could blow you off your hand, so you're last to act pre-flop. So that means that you can call much wider. In the cutoff, if you call there are still three players behind you who might raise you there, and then you have to fold. So you definitely don't want to call Jack 8 suited, which you would do in the big blind. You don't want to, or Jack 9 suited, let's say, against under the gun raise. You don't want to call that in the cutoff. Absolutely not. And I advocate, but that again, you can really only recommend my free masterclass on splashy, loose, low stakes games that's coming out very soon. And in that one, I talk a lot about that, and I say that I tend to not even have a calling range in the cutoff. If someone raises under the gun or low jack or whatever, I will usually play a 3-bet or fold range. Now, there are a few exceptions to that, which I will go into in the masterclass, but in general, I think I do quite well by just 3-betting or folding in the cutoff. I have to say that your videos really helped me to recognize and avoid my leaks. Well, thank you, and you're very welcome for that. And that's exactly the purpose of this channel, to help you guys get rid of your leaks. So, speaking of that, let's continue here. What else do we have? Is there ever a case to raise on the bigger side, so like 5x, in live poker to get more value pre, because people are relatively inelastic pre with wider ranges, and there's so little 3-betting to be had? That is, like, you can make a big video about that, and I will probably one day. So I once published a video where I said that I do advocate for betting, for raising bigger pre-flop in live settings, especially at 1-2, because exactly these things, you just want to have more money in the pot and so on. And I still think that is true. However, I got a lot of stick for that at the time, and now I'm a bit more careful with that advice. And the thing is, if you go bigger, first of all, you have to understand that you're making a mistake. Like in pure GTO terms, you just make a mistake by going bigger. Now, you don't make a mistake if you have pocket aces or kings, but if these are the only two hands that you, or maybe queens or so, that you raise bigger than anything else, then it's fine. But then you're just completely imbalanced, which can be okay. If no one notices that, then by all means do it. But against even like a tiny bit of competent players, you just can't do that. And then you have to be a bit more careful, and especially in early position. If you're even if you have pocket aces, for example, and you're at a table where you know it's going to go 6 ways to the flop, because every hand does that, and you have to be aware that pocket aces is an underdog against the other 5 hands combined. You only have around 40% equity, if even, against the others to win that pot. So you don't want to inflate the pot under the gun with your pocket aces, or indeed with any other hand, if you go 6 ways to a flop and you're out of position and you're not favored to win that hand. So in early position, I would therefore never raise bigger than 3x or maybe 3.5x or something like that. And that's actually a mistake that I made until very, very recently. I've only now really started not doing that anymore. Once you get later, like if everyone else folds and you're in the cutoff or button, then I think you can go bigger. Then I would say you can go bigger anyway with your entire range, and then you can go even a little bigger with your aces and kings if no one notices, and then you get really good value pre. So this is what I've always done, but in early position now I have actually changed what I am doing. Right. The masterclass is not there. I'm actually just working on it. So I filmed it earlier today and I'm editing it. I don't know. It probably won't come out this Thursday, but it might be next week on Thursday. So just watch out for it. You can't miss it if you subscribe to the channel. And if not, then this is a good reminder that you should maybe subscribe to the channel. What app do you recommend in order to record hand histories? I use Bankroll Tracker. Maybe there are better apps. Bankroll Tracker is the only one that I really know as well. There aren't many out there. Bankroll Tracker is a pretty good one. To be honest with you, I just record the hands on my phone at the moment, just without any tracker. I just got used to it, and it goes quite quickly once you get used to it. I just type them in on my phone. I have an abbreviated version of it, and that's how I do it. But the Bankroll Tracker is a very, very good one, and also you can then later use it again, and it shows you the hand. Whereas in my on the phone, obviously that's not the case. But I then use my replayer that I have to show the hands in my videos. Okay, we're getting close to the end, but I still have a little bit here. So someone says, is 1-3 live still beatable? And what about the recreational players? I play stars NL50 to NL100, but playing live for small stakes. I cannot apply my knowledge as they are not playing any range. Um, well, yeah, so that's the usual thing. If you genuinely beat NL 100, then there is no way that you won't be making money at 1-2 live or 1-3 live. I just don't believe that, unless, of course, the rake is unbeatable. But if the rake is beatable, then you will be a winning player there. The problem is, though, you can't just expect to take your skills and transfer them 1-to-1 from online to live poker, because that will indeed just not work like that. If you start three betting the passive old man coffee type of players with your bluffs, and you get four bet, and then you think you have to five bet them or something like that, that will go terribly wrong. So you have to allow some time to adapt to that. You have to learn to study multi-way pots, because that's the bread and butter at 1-2 and 1-3 live. So you have to do all these things before you can really be comfortable. But still, I think you might just be running bad as well, because if you are genuinely a winning player, then even if you make a lot of live mistakes as they were, you should still be doing all right. Maybe not crushing it, but I still think you should be doing all right. So I'm not sure what's going wrong there. Okay, one more here. The best rake structure, is it Vegas, Florida, Texas, Louisiana, or California? I'm guessing Texas, but not sure. Okay, I'm not familiar with all of them here, so only some of them. For example, I don't know what the situation is in Louisiana, so if someone from Louisiana or who plays there can get involved in this, then please do so. I do not know what the rake structure is there. I can definitely tell that California is not the best rake structure. In fact, they have a drop, and it's pretty awful, especially for like small pots, because they take a massive chunk out of the pot once the pot goes to the flop. And I think in some casinos they even take something out pre-flop, so that's definitely not great. Vegas has a pretty good one. Florida, I think, as well, they're quite similar, so those are pretty good. Texas doesn't have a rake. They're not allowed to take rake there, so they have an hourly rake, as it were, an hourly fee that you have to pay. And that just depends, like the higher you play, the better that one will be. If you play 1-2 or 1-3, and I don't even know if they have those stakes in Texas because I've never played there, but it might be that then they're not as favorable, especially if you play a very tight style, because like the looser you play, the more rake you tend to pay. So if you play very tight in Texas, that's not great. But what I will say is it allows you to play a little wider, a little looser, because there is no rake per hand. So that's actually quite a positive. So in general, I would say, yeah, Texas is quite good, but with that caveat, and I think Vegas and Florida are pretty good for American standards. And okay, this is it. I've run out of questions. If nothing comes from you guys, thank you very much for watching, and see you on the next one. Bye.